I've never been good at asking for help. That's something I learned young, not through any single moment of cruelty or neglect, but through 1,000 small lessons that accumulated like sediment at the bottom of a river. By the time I was old enough to recognize the pattern, it had already become part of who I was. I was the capable one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need anything from anyone. It's strange how families assign roles without ever saying them aloud. My older sister Miranda was the sensitive one, prone to tears and dramatic declarations, requiring constant reassurance and attention. My younger brother Joel was the golden child, brilliant and charismatic, destined for greatness according to everyone who met him. And I was Emma, steady and unremarkable, the middle child who kept things running smoothly in the background. I didn't mind, not really. Or at least I told myself I didn't mind. There's a certain safety in being underestimated and having low expectations to meet. While Miranda's every mood swing was analyzed and Joel's every achievement was celebrated, I could move through life at my own pace, making my own quiet decisions without much interference. The car accident happened on a Tuesday in October, 3 weeks after my 32nd birthday. I was driving home from work, taking the route I'd taken hundreds of times before, when a delivery truck ran a red light and slammed into the driver's side of my sedan. I remember the sound more than anything else, the catastrophic crunch of metal, the explosive pop of the airbag, the strange musical quality of shattering glass. Then everything went white and distant, like I was falling backward into cotton. I woke up in the hospital 6 hours later with a fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, a shattered left wrist, severe concussion, and more bruises than the emergency room staff bothered to count. The orthopedic surgeon, a kind woman in her 50s with grey streaks in her dark hair, explained that I was lucky. The word felt absurd while I was lying there unable to move without pain screaming through every nerve, but I understood what she meant. It could have been so much worse. My recovery timeline was extensive. The pelvis fracture alone would require at least 3 months before I could walk unassisted, possibly longer. The wrist needed surgery and would be in a cast for 6 to 8 weeks. The ribs would heal on their own, but made breathing, coughing, and any kind of movement agonizing in the meantime. The concussion meant rest, limited screen time, no physical exertion, and constant monitoring for complications. I would need help. Significant help. The kind of help that required someone to be present to assist with basic tasks I'd taken for granted my entire adult life. Showering, dressing, preparing food, getting to and from medical appointments. The hospital social worker, a gentleman with a clipboard and genuine concern in his eyes, asked about my support system. My family lives close, I told him. My parents are 20 minutes away, my sister's across town, my brother's about half an hour out. He nodded, making notes. That's good, you'll need someone to stay with you for at least the first few weeks. Do you live alone? Yes, but it'll be fine. My family will help. He looked up at me then, something careful in his expression. It's important to have a clear plan before discharge. Recovery from these kinds of injuries requires consistent, reliable support. Have you talked to them about what you'll need? I hadn't yet. I'd only been conscious for a few hours and my phone had been destroyed in the crash. The hospital had contacted my parents from the information in my wallet, and they'd come during the night while I was still unconscious, but they'd gone home before I woke up. My mother had left a note with the nurse saying they'd be back in the morning and to rest. I will, I promised him. It'll be fine. That phrase would become something of a mantra over the following months. It'll be fine. My parents arrived the next morning with Miranda. My father, tall and perpetually distracted, kissed my forehead and immediately began asking the doctors technical questions about healing timelines and surgical procedures, as if understanding the mechanics would somehow solve the problem. My mother, petite and anxious, fluttered around my bedside, adjusting blankets and fussing with the flowers they'd brought, her hands never quite still. Miranda cried. She stood at the foot of my hospital bed and wept, mascara running down her face, while she talked about how terrified she'd been when she got the call, how she'd barely slept, how she couldn't stop imagining what might have happened if things had been worse. I lay there, still foggy from pain medication, and tried to comfort her. I'm okay, I said, though every word sent sharp pain through my ribs. Really, Miranda, I'm going to be fine. She nodded, sniffling, and my mother put an arm around her, guiding her to a chair. It's just been such a shock for all of us, my mother said. Thank goodness you're all right. There was something surreal about comforting them while I was the one in the hospital bed, but it was familiar. This was how things had always worked. Miranda felt things intensely, and the rest of us adjusted. Joel didn't come that day. He was in the middle of a major project at work, my father explained. Something about a product launch that required his full attention. He sends his love, my mother added. He feels terrible that he can't get away right now. I told him it was fine. The conversation about my recovery came later, after Miranda had pulled herself together and my parents had exhausted their medical questions. The orthopedic surgeon had been by to explain the surgery on my wrist scheduled for the following day, and the discharge planner had outlined what my home situation would need to look like. So I'll need to stay with someone for a while, I said, trying to keep my voice matter of fact. Or have someone stay with me. The first few weeks especially, I won't be able to do much on my own. My mother's face creased with concern. Oh honey, of course, we'll figure something out. You could come stay with us, my father offered, but he was already frowning, working through the logistics. Though I suppose your old room is Joel's home office now, we'd need to clear it out, move the desk down to the basement, and the bathroom upstairs. You'd have to navigate the stairs, which might be difficult with the crutches. The guest room downstairs, my mother suggested. But that's right next to your father's study, and he has those early morning conference calls. They went back and forth, identifying problems faster than solutions. The house wasn't set up for someone with limited mobility. The guest room bathroom had a tub but no shower. The doorways might be too narrow for a wheelchair if I needed one. They were both still working full-time and couldn't take extended leave. What about Miranda? I suggested. Your place is ground floor, isn't it? My sister looked stricken. Oh, Emma, I would, but you know how small my apartment is. There is barely room for me and the cats, and with my anxiety, I don't think I could handle the responsibility of making sure you're okay. What if something went wrong? What if you fell or needed emergency help and I panic? I don't think I could forgive myself. It's okay, I said quickly. I understand. And I did understand. Miranda had always been fragile in her way, overwhelmed by the weight of other people's needs. It wasn't cruelty. It was just who she was. We'll hire someone, my father decided. A home health aide or a nurse, someone professional who knows how to handle this kind of situation. My mother nodded with relief. That's a wonderful idea. We'll find the best care available. Money isn't an issue, sweetheart. We want you to have everything you need. It was a generous offer. I knew that. They were offering to pay for professional care, which wasn't nothing. But there was something hollow about it, something that made my chest feel tight in a way that had nothing to do with my broken ribs. I'd still like family around sometimes, I said quietly. If possible, just to not feel so alone, of course, my mother said, patting my hand. We'll visit all the time, every day if we can manage it. You won't be alone, sweetheart. The conversation moved onto other things: the police report, my insurance, the status of my destroyed car, whether the truck driver's company would be liable. Practical matters that needed addressing. I let myself drift, exhausted by pain and medication and a disappointment I didn't want to name. The surgery on my wrist went smoothly. I woke up with a heavy cast and more pain, which they assured me was normal. The discharge planner helped arrange for a home health aide to start the day I got home, a middle-aged woman named Patricia who had 15 years of experience and excellent references. I was released from the hospital 5 days after the accident. My father drove me home in his sedan, pillow wedged behind my back, while my mother followed in her car with my prescriptions and the paperwork I'd accumulated. Patricia met us at my apartment, professionally cheerful and immediately competent. She'd already been given my keys and had spent the morning rearranging my furniture to make pathways for my crutches and setting up the shower chair the hospital had provided. My parents stayed for an hour, helping me settle in, making sure I had everything I needed. My mother filled my refrigerator with prepared meals she'd bought from the grocery store deli. My father set up a pill organizer with my medications and printed out the dosing schedule. Miranda sent a care package that arrived while they were there: soft blankets, lavender candles, a journal with an inspirational quote on the cover, and a card about being strong. Then they left, and it was just me and Patricia, a kind stranger being paid to keep me alive. The first few weeks blurred together in a haze of pain, medication, and helpless frustration. I had never fully appreciated how much independence I'd taken for granted. The simple act of getting out of bed required planning and assistance. Showering was a production that left me exhausted and aching. Getting dressed meant choosing clothes that could accommodate the cast and work around my limited mobility, mostly loose dresses and zip-up hoodies. Patricia was good at her job. She was patient and gentle, never making me feel ashamed of needing help with intimate tasks like bathing and dressing. She prepared simple meals, kept my living space clean, tracked my medications, and drove me to follow-up appointments. She filled the practical role perfectly. But she wasn't family. Our conversations were pleasant but surface level. She told me about her children and her garden, and I asked polite questions, but there was a professional distance that never quite closed. She was there from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening on weekdays, shorter shifts on weekends. The rest of the time, I was alone. My parents visited twice in the first week. My mother brought more prepared food and stayed for half an hour, chatting nervously about the neighbors and a documentary she'd watched. My father came on a different day, checking that the accessibility modifications were working and asking if I needed anything. Both visits felt dutiful, checkboxes being marked. Miranda texted frequently, long messages about how worried she was and how guilty she felt that she couldn't do more. She sent more care packages, adult coloring books, essential oils, a weighted eye mask. She called once and cried about how hard it was to see me suffering. I spent the conversation reassuring her that I was managing fine. Joel sent a text 2 weeks after the accident. Hey sis, heard about the crash. That sucks. Hope you're healing up. Things are crazy at work, but I'll try to stop by soon. He didn't stop by. Physical therapy started in week 3, initially at my apartment with a therapist who came twice a week, then eventually at a clinic once I could manage the car ride. The sessions were grueling. My body, which had always been reliable and capable, felt like a stranger. Simple movements required enormous effort. The therapist, a woman named Keisha with infinite patience and a no-nonsense attitude, pushed me through exercises that left me sweating and nauseated from pain. Recovery isn't linear, she told me during one particularly difficult session when I was close to tears from frustration. You're going to have good days and bad days. What matters is that you keep showing up. I kept showing up. Physical challenges were one thing. The emotional isolation was something else entirely. I had friends, of course, people I'd known from college and work, but those relationships had always been somewhat surface level. I was the person people called when they needed advice or a reliable presence, not the person they thought to check on when things got hard. A few sent flowers and cards when they heard about the accident. 1 or 2 visited in the first couple weeks, awkward and unsure what to say, not staying long. No one really understood what to do with someone who was injured, but not dying, suffering, but not an immediate crisis. The narrative didn't fit neatly into the stories people knew how to tell. I wasn't in the hospital fighting for my life. I wasn't miraculously healed and back to normal. I was stuck in the messy, boring middle of recovery, the part that stretched on for months without clear milestones or dramatic moments. My days became a routine of small, painful tasks. Waking up required carefully shifting my weight to avoid stressing my pelvis. Breakfast meant whatever I could prepare one-handed or that Patricia had left ready for me. Physical therapy exercises 3 times a day. Reading, though the concussion made it hard to focus for long periods. Television, though too much screen time triggered headaches. Naps when the pain got too intense. Medications at precise intervals. And underneath it all, a growing awareness that I was utterly alone in this in a way that mattered. My parents continued their periodic visits, usually once or twice a week. The pattern was consistent. They'd arrive, ask how I was feeling, comment on my progress or lack thereof, stay for 30 to 45 minutes, then leave. My mother brought food or small gifts. My father brought questions and suggestions. Neither seemed to know what to do with the reality of my situation beyond these brief check-ins. You're looking better, my mother would say, even when I felt no different from the week before. The doctor said you're on track for healing, my father would remind me, as if the timeline itself was reassuring. They meant well. I knew they meant well. But there was something perfunctory about it all, something that made me feel like a problem being managed rather than a daughter being cared for. Miranda's visits were less frequent but more emotionally intense. She came every 2 or 3 weeks, usually bringing some new wellness product she'd discovered, organic tea, supplements, healing crystals. She'd sit in my living room and talk about how hard it was for her to see me like this, how much it was affecting her mental health, how guilty she felt about not being able to do more. I found myself comforting her during these visits, reassuring her that I understood, that she shouldn't feel guilty, that I was managing fine. It was easier than asking for what I actually needed, which felt too vulnerable and likely to end in disappointment. She'll never visited. He texted occasionally, messages that felt copied and pasted in their generic concern. Thinking of you, sis. Hope you're hanging in there. Let me know if you need anything. I never responded asking for anything. I knew instinctively that it would go nowhere. Around week 6, I had a follow-up appointment with the orthopedic surgeon. Patricia drove me, helping me navigate from the car to the wheelchair the clinic provided for longer distances. The x-rays showed that my pelvis was healing well, my ribs were knitting back together, and the wrist surgery had been successful. Everything was progressing exactly as expected. You're doing great, the surgeon said, reviewing the images. Keep up with the physical therapy, continue being careful with weight bearing on that left side, and we'll see you back in a month. Patricia drove me home, chattering about her daughter's upcoming wedding. I stared out the window and felt nothing like great. I felt tired, lonely, frustrated by how slowly my body was recovering, how much longer this would take, how little seemed to be changing despite all the effort. That evening, alone in my apartment, I cried for the first time since the accident. Not from pain, though that was constant, but from a loneliness so profound it felt like drowning. I wanted my mother to hold me and tell me everything would be okay. I wanted my father to sit with me and just be present without trying to fix things. I wanted my siblings to show up without being asked, to recognize that I was struggling, to care enough to make the effort. I wanted to matter enough that they'd prioritize me without me having to beg. But I didn't know how to ask for that. I'd spent my entire life being the one who didn't need anything, who managed on her own, who made things easier for everyone else. I didn't have the language to express this kind of need, and I wasn't sure they'd know how to hear it if I tried. So I cried alone, and then I dried my eyes and took my evening medications and went to bed, and the next day I woke up and continued with my routine because that was what I knew how to do. The turning point came in week 8, though I didn't recognize it as a turning point at the time. I was having a particularly bad day. The pain was worse than usual, a deep ache that settled into my bones and wouldn't ease no matter what position I tried. The weather had turned cold and rainy, and something about the atmospheric pressure made everything hurt more. I'd dropped a glass that morning, my casted wrist making me clumsy, and spent 20 minutes carefully cleaning up the shards while Patricia was out getting groceries. My mother called around noon. Just checking in, sweetheart, how are you feeling? Not great today, I admitted, my voice tight. Everything hurts and I'm just tired of this. Oh, honey, I'm sorry. You know healing takes time. I know. I paused, trying to find words for what I needed. I'm feeling really isolated. I think I could use some company. Would you be able to come sit with me for a bit? Maybe watch a movie or just talk? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Today? Oh, sweetie, I can't today. I have my book club this afternoon, and then dinner plans with the Hendersons. What about this weekend? Sure, I said, swallowing the disappointment. This weekend is fine. You could call Miranda, my mother suggested. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at Miranda's contact information. I could call her. I could ask her to come over to just sit with me for a while. But I already knew how that conversation would go. She'd either say no, explaining how difficult it would be for her anxiety, or she'd say yes and then spend the visit making it about her feelings, requiring me to manage her emotional response to my suffering. I didn't call. Instead, I sat in my living room, rain pattering against the windows, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder and clearer than that. A recognition of truth I'd been avoiding. My family loved me, I didn't doubt that. But their love was passive, something that existed in theory but didn't translate into action when action requires sacrifice or discomfort. They loved me the way you love a sturdy piece of furniture, appreciated when needed, easily forgotten when not. They had assigned me the role of the capable one so long ago that they genuinely couldn't see me any other way. Even now, broken and struggling, they saw my situation as temporary, something I was managing, something that didn't require their active participation beyond periodic check-ins and financial support. And I had enabled this. I had spent 3 decades proving that I didn't need them, that I could handle everything on my own, that I was fine. I had comforted Miranda through her anxieties and celebrated Joel's achievements and never asked for anything that might burden or inconvenience anyone. I had made myself so easy to overlook that they'd learned to do exactly that. The realization didn't come with dramatics or rage. It was quiet, settling over me like snow. And with it came a decision equally quiet. I would recover. I would heal, because my body was already doing the work whether my family showed up or not. But I would remember this. I would remember who was here and who wasn't. I would remember what it felt like to need help and to be offered money instead of presents. I would remember all of it, and when the time came, and it would come, because life is a way of circling back, I would make different choices than they had made. Not out of spite, out of honesty. Patricia came back with groceries, cheerful despite the rain, and helped me put things away. She made lunch and chatted about her weekend plans. She was kind, and I was grateful for her, but she was being paid to be there. That was the difference. My family should have wanted to be there, should have made space in their lives without being asked, should have recognized that their capable, responsible Emma was drowning and needed someone to throw her a line. They hadn't recognized it. Or perhaps they had and simply didn't know what to do with that recognition, so they'd looked away. I ate my lunch and took my medications and did my physical therapy exercises, and I began to understand that recovery was going to mean more than just healing my bones and rebuilding my strength. It was going to mean rebuilding my understanding of who I was in relation to the people I'd call family. The weekend visit my mother had promised didn't happen. She called Saturday morning to reschedule. Something had come up with Joel, some crisis at work that had him stressed, and she wanted to be available in case he needed her. You understand, don't you, sweetie? We'll come by next week for sure. Of course, I said. I understand. And I did. I understood perfectly. Physical therapy progressed. By week 10, I could walk short distances with crutches, though it exhausted me. By week 12, I was transitioning to a cane for stability. The cast came off my wrist, revealing pale, weak skin and a hand that barely felt like mine. More physical therapy, different exercises, we're learning how to grip and hold and manipulate objects. Patricia's hours reduced as I became more independent. By week 14, she was only coming 3 days a week, then 2. I was managing most tasks on my own, slowly and painfully, but managing. My family's visits didn't increase to fill the gap. If anything, they became less frequent. Now that I was visibly improving, now that the crisis phase had passed, I think they felt they'd done their duty. The danger was over. I was on the mend. They could return to their normal lives without guilt. I saw my parents perhaps once every 2 weeks. Miranda maybe once a month. Joel not at all, though his texts continued the sporadic reassurances that he was thinking of me. What they didn't see was how hard every single day still was. How I had to plan every activity around energy levels and pain management. How I still couldn't sleep through the night because changing positions woke me up. How I had panic attacks in grocery stores, hypervigilant about other shoppers and shopping carts, terrified of being bumped or knocked over. How I was fighting through depression and anxiety that the accident had triggered, dark thoughts that circled in the early morning hours when I couldn't sleep. I didn't tell them about any of this. What would be the point? They'd shown me clearly what level of support they were willing to provide, and it wasn't this. It was cheerful check-ins and reassurances that I was doing great and encouragement to stay positive. I went to my appointments. I did my exercises. I slowly, painstakingly rebuilt my life. Lauren. By month 4, I was cleared to return to work part-time. My job had held my position protected by medical leave policies, and my manager had been understanding about my need for accommodations. I started with 3 days a week working from home, gradually building back my stamina. It felt good to have purpose again beyond healing. To use my mind for something other than managing pain and tracking appointments. To be productive, to contribute, to be the capable Anna that everyone expected. My colleagues welcomed me back warmly. They asked how I was feeling, and I said fine, and we moved on to talk about work. It was a relief, honestly, to be treated normally, to not be defined by my injury. But there was also something sad about how easily I slipped back into that role. The person who was fine. The person who didn't need anything. The person who could be relied upon but didn't require reciprocation. Month 5 brought Joel's engagement. He'd been dating someone named Vanessa for about 18 months, a detail I knew primarily from my mother's updates since Joel rarely shared information directly. The proposal happened some romantic weekend getaway, and my mother called me immediately, bubbling with excitement. They're thinking a fall wedding next year, she gushed. Vanessa has wonderful taste, and Joel wants something elegant but not too formal. Isn't it exciting? Very exciting, I agreed. I'm happy for him. We're having an engagement party next month, my mother continued. Just family and close friends. You'll come, won't you? It would mean so much to Joel. I thought about the fact that Joel hadn't visited me once during my recovery. Hadn't called except for those few perfunctory texts. Hadn't shown even the slightest interest in how I was doing or what I needed. I'll be there, I said. Because I was the capable one. The one who showed up. The one who put aside hurt feelings and met expectations. The engagement party was held at my parents' house on a sunny Saturday in early March, almost 6 months after my accident. I'd been cleared to drive short distances by then, though I still used a cane for stability and tired easily. I arrived to find a house full of people, relatives I saw only at major events, Joel's friends from college and work, Vanessa's family. Joel was holding court in the living room, arm around his fiancée, radiating happiness. Vanessa was lovely, tall, poised, warm in her greetings to everyone. They looked perfect together, like people who'd never known real hardship or struggle. He saw me come in and waved enthusiastically. Emma, you made it. I made my way over, navigating through clusters of guests. Congratulations, I said, hugging him carefully. I'm really happy for you both, thanks, sis. It's good to see you up and around. You're looking great. I wasn't looking great. I was still too thin for months of reduced appetite, still moved with visible stiffness, still had shadows under my eyes from poor sleep. But I was upright and present, which apparently counted as great. How's Vanessa? I asked, turning to her with a smile. She was gracious and friendly, asking polite questions about my recovery, sympathizing about how difficult the past months must have been. The conversation was pleasant and utterly superficial. Within 5 minutes, someone else claimed their attention, and I was free to drift toward the kitchen. Miranda found me there, fixing myself a plate of appetizers. She hugged me tightly, smelling of expensive perfume. I'm so glad you're here, she said. I've been worried about you. I'm doing okay, I told her. Getting better every day. You're so brave, she said, her eyes welling up. I don't know how you've managed it all alone. I hadn't been alone. I'd had Patricia, paid for by our parents. What I'd lacked was family who showed up without being compensated or obligated. But pointing that out wouldn't change anything, so I just smiled and changed the subject. The party continued around me. I found a chair and sat more than I mingled, conserving energy. I watched my family interact, my parents playing proud hosts, Miranda fluttering between groups with wine in hand, Joel and Vanessa at the center of attention. I watched aunts and uncles and cousins I barely knew, all celebrating this happy occasion. And I felt separate from it all. Like I was watching through glass, present but not part of things. My mother found me during a lull. Are you having a good time, sweetie? It's a lovely party, I said honestly. Joel seems so happy, doesn't he? She glanced toward where he stood laughing with friends. Vanessa is wonderful. I think she's exactly what he needs. She seems great, I agreed. My mother sat down beside me, smoothing her skirt. I'm so glad you could come. I know it's still hard for you to get around. I'm managing. You've always been so strong, she said, patting my hand. So independent. Your father and I are very proud of you, you know, the way you've handled everything. I really looked at her, and I wondered if she had any idea what she was saying. If she understood that praising my independence in this context was really just acknowledging that she left me to handle it alone. If she recognized the irony of being proud of me for not needing them while never questioning why I'd had to be so strong in the first place. Thank you, I said instead. She smiled and squeezed my hand and then stood up, called away by some hostessing duty. I sat in my chair and finished my plate of food and felt the distance between us like an ocean. I left the party early, citing fatigue, which was true enough. My body was exhausted from the effort of being upright and social for several hours. But more than that, I was emotionally drained from the performance of pretending everything was fine, that I was happy to be celebrating my brother who hadn't bothered to see me once during the worst period of my life. Joel hugged me goodbye at the door. Thanks for coming, Em. It means a lot, of course, I said. Congratulations again. I drove home in the fading afternoon light, my hands tight on the wheel, and I felt something hot in my chest. Not anger. Something more like resolution. They would need me eventually. That was how families worked. There would come a time when Miranda had a crisis and needed someone steady and reliable. When Joel needed advice or support or someone to help him navigate a difficult situation. When my parents were older and required care, when their own independence failed them. And when that time came, I would remember this. I would remember who showed up when I needed them. The wedding planning consumed my family for the next several months. My mother was in her element, helping Vanessa coordinate vendors and make decisions. Miranda was named maid of honor and took the role seriously, organizing a bachelorette party and a bridal shower, posting constantly on social media about wedding preparations. I was invited to everything, of course. I was family. I attended the bridal shower, bringing a gift from the registry. I went to the bachelorette party, a wine tasting weekend that exhausted me but that I pushed through with a smile. I was fitted for my bridesmaid dress, elegant navy gown that would require heels I wasn't sure I could manage but that I agreed to anyway. Through it all, no one asked how I was really doing. The accident had receded into the past, ancient history, something I'd recovered from. The fact that I still had pain, that I was still in physical therapy, that I was still dealing with the psychological aftermath, none of that fit into the narrative of Joel's happiness, so it was quietly ignored. I returned to work full-time in month 7. It was harder than I expected, training in ways that had nothing to do with physical stamina. But I needed the normalcy, needed the structure, needed to feel useful and productive. My coworkers were understanding about my lingering limitations. My manager approved accommodations and more ergonomic setup, flexibility for medical appointments, permission to work from home when needed. I was grateful for the professional courtesy that my family had never quite managed. Month 8, 9, 10 passed in a blur of work and continued recovery and wedding preparations. My physical therapist was pleased with my progress. The orthopedic surgeon cleared me at my 1-year follow-up, declaring my pelvis fully healed, my wrist functional if not quite back to full strength. I still had pain, especially in cold weather or after long periods of activity, but it was manageable. I had learned to live with it. The psychological recovery was slower. I still had anxiety about driving, especially in intersections. I still had nightmares, sometimes dreams of impact and pain. I'd started seeing a therapist, something I paid for out of pocket because I didn't want it going through insurance, didn't want the record, didn't want to explain to my family that I needed mental health support. The therapist, Dr. Chen, was a calm woman in her 40s who specialized in trauma. Our sessions helped me process not just the accident but also the loneliness of recovery, the family dynamics that had shaped my inability to ask for help, the ways I made myself small and undemanding to avoid burdening others. You've learned to equate your worth with your usefulness, she observed during one session. When you couldn't be useful because of your injuries, you felt worthless, and your family's response reinforced that they valued the professional care that kept you functional but didn't provide the emotional support that would have acknowledged your inherent worth beyond your capabilities. It was a hard truth to hear. Harder to sit with. They love you, Dr. Chen continued. I don't doubt that, but love without action is just sentiment, and you deserve more than sentiment during your recovery. What do I do with that? I asked. With knowing they failed me, you acknowledge it, you grieve it, you decide what boundaries you need going forward to protect yourself, and you remember that their failure was about their limitations, not your worth. The wedding approached. My mother called frequently with updates and questions, most of which had nothing to do with me but which I listened to patiently. Miranda sent long text threads to the bridesmaids about coordinating hair and makeup. Joel, to his credit, called once to thank me for being part of the wedding party and to ask if I needed any special accommodations for the day. I'm fine, I told him, because that was easier than explaining that wearing heels for 6 hours was going to hurt, that standing through a long ceremony was going to hurt, that all of it was going to hurt, but I was doing it anyway because that's what was expected. Great, he said, relieved. I really appreciate you being there, Em. You've always been someone I could count on. That phrase. Count on. As if I was a tool in a shed, reliable when needed, easily stored away when not. I'm happy to be part of your day, I said and meant it. I was happy for him, genuinely. His happiness wasn't diminished by his failure to show up for me. They were separate things. I could hold both truths at once. The wedding was beautiful. Full colors, perfect weather, a ceremony at a historic estate with a reception in a converted barn that had been decorated with stunning attention to detail. Vanessa looked radiant. Joel looked happier than I'd ever seen him. My parents beamed with pride. Miranda cried through the vows. I stood at the altar in my navy dress and painful heels, holding my bouquet with hands that ached from the weight, and they smiled because it was a happy occasion. I made it through the photographs, though standing that long made my back and pelvis scream. I made it through the reception, sitting as much as possible, dancing only for the required family dances, and then excusing myself. During the father-daughter dance, I watched my father waltz with my mother, both of them looking misty-eyed and sentimental. I thought about the fact that he'd visited me maybe a dozen times during my recovery, always briefly, always with an agenda. That he'd offered money but not time, solutions but not presence. During the mother-son dance, I watched my mother and Joel move across the floor, her face radiant with joy. I thought about all the times she prioritized his needs, Miranda's needs, everyone's needs but mine, because I was the capable one who didn't need anything. I wasn't bitter. Bitterness was too hot an emotion for what I felt. This was colder, clearer, a simple recognition of truth. The speeches came. The best man told funny stories about Joel's college days. Miranda gave a tearful maid of honor speech about how perfect Joel and Vanessa were together. My parents toasted the couple, talking about the joy of seeing their son so happy, so successful, so blessed. No one mentioned me except in passing, grouped in with the generic thanks to family and friends who have supported us. I hadn't expected anything different. This wasn't my day. But the casual erasure of my existence felt consistent with the past year's experience. I left the reception around 10, exhausted and hurting. I hugged Joel and Vanessa, wished them every happiness, and made my way to my car. The cool night air felt good after the warmth of the crowded barn. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment before starting the engine, just breathing, letting the performance fall away. My phone buzzed. A text from Miranda. "You left early? Are you okay?" I typed back, "Just tired, beautiful wedding, see you soon." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Okay, love you too," I replied, because I did love her. I loved all of them. But I also knew now that love wasn't enough on its own. That love without action, without sacrifice, without showing up when it was hard, that kind of love was real but limited. And I deserved more than they'd been willing to give. Life settled into a new normal after the wedding. I was 20 months post-accident, functional in most ways, still dealing with chronic pain that I'd learned to manage. Work was going well. I'd been promoted to a senior position that came with more responsibility and better pay. I'd started dating someone I'd met through a friend, a kind man named Marcus who was patient with my physical limitations and interested in who I was beyond my capabilities. My relationship with my family continued in its established patterns. My parents called every week or two, cheerful and distant. Miranda texted frequently, sharing articles and memes, occasionally calling to talk about her latest crisis, a conflict at work, a friendship that was struggling, her ongoing anxiety about various things. I listened and offered support because that was what I did. Joel and Vanessa were settling into married life. I saw them at family dinners, occasional gatherings. Joel had been promoted at work. Vanessa was thriving in her career. They were talking about buying a house, maybe thinking about kids in a few years. Everything was perfect for them. I was genuinely happy about their happiness. But I also maintained a careful distance. When Joel called asking for advice about the home buying process, I gave him the information he needed but didn't offer to spend hours helping him research or go to showings. When he needed help moving furniture into their new place, I recommended a service instead of offering to help physically, citing my limitations honestly. "No problem," he said easily. "We'll figure it out." And they did. Because people who actually need something find ways to get their needs met. Joel had always had that ability, had always known how to ask and receive. I'd never learned it, had been taught instead to meet my own needs and everyone else's. With my parents, I was pleasant and dutiful. I attended family gatherings, called on birthdays and holidays, participated in the expected ways. But I stopped going out of my way to make things easier for them. When my mother asked if I could help organize a surprise party for my father's 65th birthday, I suggested hiring an event planner instead of doing it myself. "But you're so good at organizing," she protested. "I am," I agreed. "But I don't have the time or energy right now. An event planner would do a great job." She was slightly taken aback but agreed. The party happened, professionally organized, and was lovely. My contribution was showing up and giving my father a thoughtful gift. Nothing more was required. The shift was subtle but consistent. I maintained the relationships, fulfilled the basic obligations, but I stopped making myself infinitely available. I stopped prioritizing their needs above my own. I stopped pretending that my capabilities meant I didn't have my own needs and limitations. Some of this they noticed. My mother commented once that I seemed busier than I used to be, less available. I agreed that I was focusing more on my own life, my own priorities. She seemed puzzled but didn't push. Miranda noticed more, I think, because she'd relied heavily on my emotional support. When she called in crisis and I couldn't talk for hours, couldn't drop everything to process her feelings, she got upset. "You're being distant," she accused once. "Ever since the accident, you've been different." "I'm different," I said honestly. "The accident changed me, recovery changed me, but you're all healed now," she said, confused. "Everything's back to normal, my bones are healed," I corrected. "But I'm still dealing with the impact, and I'm making different choices about how I spend my time and energy." She didn't like it, but there wasn't much she could do about it. I still loved her. I still talked to her regularly. It just didn't make her feelings my responsibility anymore. The real test came 2 years and 4 months after my accident. My father had a stroke. It happened suddenly, a Thursday morning while he was working from home. My mother found him slumped at his desk, speech slurred, the right side of his face drooping. She called 911, hysterical, then called Miranda, who called me. I was at work when I got Miranda's call. "Dad's in the hospital," she said, crying. "He had a stroke. Mom's a mess. Can you come?" I felt my stomach drop, genuine fear and concern flooding through me. "Of course," I said. "Which hospital?" She told me, and I told her I'd be there as soon as I could. I informed my manager about the family emergency, grabbed my things, and drove to the hospital, my hands steady on the wheel despite the anxiety churning in my chest. I found my mother and Miranda in the emergency waiting room. My mother was pale and shaking. Miranda was crying, mascara streaked down her face. I hugged them both, got the basic information from the nurse, and then we waited. The hours passed slowly. Joel arrived eventually, having rushed from a meeting. He looked shaken, scared in a way I'd rarely seen him. We sat together, a family united in fear for our father, and waited for news. The doctor came out around 6. My father had suffered an ischemic stroke, a blood clot that had blocked an artery in his brain. They'd administered clot-busting medication and he was stable, but the next 24 to 48 hours were critical. There would be impacts, the extent wasn't clear yet. Speech difficulties, possible paralysis on the right side, cognitive effects. He'd need extensive rehabilitation. My mother sobbed against my shoulder. Joel put his head in his hands. Miranda kept repeating, "This can't be happening." I held my mother and felt a strange sense of déjà vu. This fear, this helplessness, this sudden rupture of normal life, I knew this feeling. I'd lived it when I was the one in the hospital bed, when my life had changed in an instant and recovery stretched out into an uncertain future. They let us see him briefly. He was conscious but confused, his speech garbled, the right side of his face still drooping. He seemed frightened, this man who'd always been so confident and in control. My mother held his left hand and cried. Joel stood at the foot of the bed looking lost. Miranda couldn't even come in the room, too overwhelmed by seeing him like this. I stood beside the bed and met his eyes. "You're going to be okay," I told him, keeping my voice calm and certain. "This is scary, but you're getting good care and you're going to recover. It's going to take time, but you'll get through it." He focused on me, seemed to understand, and some of the fear in his eyes eased slightly. The hospital social worker appeared as we were leaving his room, asking about care plans, support systems, what the family situation looked like. It was almost word for word the same conversation I'd had after my accident, except this time I was on the other side of it. My mother was too distraught to focus. Miranda was crying too hard to be coherent. Joel was trying to process, asking questions, but clearly overwhelmed. So I stepped in, the capable one, and had the conversation with the social worker about rehabilitation facilities, home care needs, the timeline for recovery, what kind of support my father would require. "He'll need someone with him consistently for the first few months at least," the social worker explained. "The right side weakness means he'll need assistance with most daily activities, and the speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, it's going to be intensive. We'll figure it out," my mother said, her voice shaking. "We'll do whatever he needs." Over the following days, as my father stabilized and began the slow process of recovery, the reality of the situation became clear. He would be in a hospital for about a week, then transferred to a rehabilitation facility for several weeks of intensive therapy. After that, he'd come home, but he'd need ongoing support help with bathing, dressing, meals, getting to appointments, continuing therapy. My mother, who'd never been particularly strong in crisis situations, was floundering. She visited the hospital every day but would come home exhausted and crying, overwhelmed by seeing my father diminished, terrified of what the future looked like. Miranda was a wreck, her anxiety spiraling. She'd visit the hospital and have panic attacks in the hallway. She called me multiple times a day, needing reassurance, needing to process her feelings, needing someone to tell her it would be okay. Joel was trying to balance his demanding job with the crisis. He visited when he could but was clearly struggling with the disruption to his carefully planned life. Vanessa was supportive but also visibly uncomfortable with the situation, unused to messy family drama. And I showed up. Every day after work, I went to the hospital. I sat with my father while my mother went home to rest. I talked to his doctors and nurses, asked questions, took notes, made sure I understood the treatment plan and prognosis. I coordinated with the social worker about rehabilitation facilities, researching options, and helping my mother make decisions she was too overwhelmed to make alone. I did all of this because he was my father and I loved him. Because when someone is hurt and scared, you show up for them. Because it was the right thing to do. But I also did it with a clarity I hadn't had before. I did it knowing exactly what I was giving, and I did it with boundaries. When my mother asked if I could take time off work to be at the hospital all day, I said no. I explained that I couldn't afford to sacrifice my job, that I had my own life and obligations, that I would visit every evening but couldn't be there constantly. When Miranda asked if she could stay at my apartment because being at our parents' house was too stressful for her, I said no. I explained that I needed my own space, that I couldn't take on the role of supporting her through this while also managing everything else. When Joel asked if I could help coordinate all the care because he was swamped at work, I said I would help but not do it alone. I insisted that we divide the responsibilities. I'd handle researching facilities and setting up the rehabilitation plan. He'd handle the insurance and financial aspects. Miranda would manage the social aspects of keeping extended family informed. They were surprised by these boundaries. Used to me saying yes, taking on whatever was needed, making things easier for everyone. But I held firm. My father came home after 5 weeks, 3 in the hospital, 2 in intensive rehab. He'd made good progress, but still needed significant support. The right side of his body was weak, his gait unsteady, his speech slow and sometimes difficult to understand. He could do some things for himself, but needed help with others. The question of care came up immediately. My mother couldn't manage alone. She was too anxious, too emotionally fragile, not physically strong enough to help him with transfers and mobility. "We'll hire someone," Joel said, echoing what our parents had done for me. "A home health aide, maybe a nurse, someone professional. That's a good idea," I agreed. "Dad will need professional support, but I also need family around," my mother said, her voice small and scared. "I can't do this alone. I can't be the only one here helping him, dealing with all of this. It's too much." There was a pause. Joel looked uncomfortable. Miranda looked at her hands. And they both, almost unconsciously, looked at me. I felt that look. Felt the weight of expectation, the assumption that capable, responsible Emma would step up, would move back home or at least be there constantly, would sacrifice her own life to make this easier for everyone. "I'll help as much as I can," I said carefully. "I can come by several times a week, help with appointments, coordinate care, but I can't move back home. I have my own life, my own job, my own commitments." "But Emma," my mother said, tears welling up. "We need you." Those 3 words. We need you. Words I wanted to hear so desperately 2 years ago, when I was the one recovering, when I was the one scared and hurting and alone. "I understand that this is hard," I said quietly. "I know what recovery looks like, and I know how much support Dad's going to need, but I can't put my entire life on hold. I will help, but I can't be the only one helping, and I can't sacrifice everything to make this easier." Joel shifted uncomfortably. "I mean, I'm happy to help too, but with work and Vanessa and everything, we all have our own lives," I interrupted gently. "That's exactly the point. We all have obligations and limitations, so we'll need to figure out a sustainable plan that distributes the responsibility and doesn't fall entirely on one person." Miranda was crying again. "I want to help, but you know how hard this is for me, seeing him like this. Then you'll need to work on managing those feelings," I said, not unkindly. "With a therapist, with medication if needed, with whatever tools help you function, because Dad needs support, and we were all going to have to stretch beyond our comfort zones. The silence that followed was heavy. They were looking at me like they didn't quite recognize me. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they'd never actually seen me clearly before, had only seen the role they'd assigned me. When I had my accident, I said quietly I needed help, significant help, for months, and I got professional care, which I was grateful for, but I needed family too. I needed people to show up, to sit with me, to see me struggling and care enough to make space in their lives, and mostly, that didn't happen. My mother's face crumpled. "Honey, we visited, you visited occasionally," I continued, keeping my voice level. "You checked in periodically, you paid for professional care, and I'm not saying that was nothing, but it wasn't presence. It wasn't sacrifice. It wasn't the kind of showing up that I needed. We didn't know," Miranda protested. "You seemed fine. You never asked. I shouldn't have had to ask," I said simply. "When someone you love is hurt and struggling, you show up. You make time. You prioritize them, not because they ask, but because you see them and you care." Joel looked stricken. "Emma, I didn't realize I was so busy with work." "I know you were busy," I acknowledged. "You were all busy with your own lives, your own priorities, and I understand that, but Dad is going to need more than what he gave me. He's going to need consistent, reliable family support in addition to professional care, and I will be part of that. I will show up, but I won't do it alone, and I won't sacrifice my life completely because I learned from experience that it's not sustainable or fair." They sat with that for a moment. My mother was crying quietly. Joel looked guilty and confused. Miranda was staring at me like I'd become a stranger. "What are you saying?" my mother finally asked. "That you won't help us. I'm saying I will help," I clarified. "But on sustainable terms, I'll come by 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday evenings to help with dinner and evening care. I'll coordinate his medical appointments and make sure he gets to therapy. I'll research equipment and modifications that will make the house safer and more accessible. But I won't be here every day. I won't put my career on hold. I won't sacrifice my relationship with Marcus or my own recovery or my own life." I looked at each of them. "Joel, you need to commit to specific days too. Pick 2 evenings a week and a few hours on the weekend. Block the time. Make it non-negotiable. And show up." "Miranda, you need to take on the tasks that don't trigger your anxiety, managing the meal planning, keeping the family calendar, fielding calls from relatives. We hire professional care for the gaps. We work together. We support each other. But we don't put it all on one person and call it fine." The word fine hung in the air like an accusation. Joel was the first to respond. "You're right," he said quietly. "I should have been there for you, and I'll be here for Dad. I can do Tuesday and Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings." Miranda nodded slowly. "I can do the organizing stuff, and I'll try to visit on weekends, even if it's hard." My mother looked at me with something like understanding dawning in her eyes. "We failed you," she said softly. "When you needed us, we failed you. You did what you knew how to do," I said, trying to be fair. "But it wasn't enough, and I need you to understand that now, so we can do better this time, for Dad and for each other." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." I moved over to hug her, and she clung to me like she was drowning. "I know," I said. "I know you are." The plan we created wasn't perfect, but it was workable. Professional care during the day while my mother was at work part-time. She'd reduced her hours to be more available. Joel on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Me on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Miranda handling logistics and visiting on weekends when she could manage it. Family dinners on Sunday where we all came together. My father's recovery was slower than mine had been. Strokes are different from physical trauma, affecting the brain in ways that make progress unpredictable. Some weeks he'd make encouraging gains in speech or mobility. Other weeks he'd plateau or even regress slightly. It was frustrating for him, terrifying for my mother, challenging for all of us. But we showed up. Joel rearranged his schedule and actually maintained his commitment, coming every Tuesday and Thursday like he'd promised. He'd help my father with dinner, work with him on speech exercises, just sit and watch television together. It was awkward at first. Joel had never been comfortable with vulnerability or dependence, but he got better at it. Miranda struggled, but tried. She managed the coordination tasks well, keeping everyone informed and organized. Her visits were still sometimes difficult, her anxiety spiking, but she worked with her therapists and found ways to cope. She started bringing art supplies and working on projects with my father, something that didn't require much talking but let them spend time together. My mother rose to the occasion in ways I hadn't expected. The crisis seemed to strengthen something in her. She became fierce about my father's care, advocating with doctors, pushing for better therapy, learning how to help him safely. She was exhausted and stressed, but she showed up every day with determination. And I kept my boundaries while keeping my commitments. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I was there, present and helpful. The other days, I lived my life, my job, my relationship with Marcus, my own continued recovery and therapy. It was hard sometimes, hearing in my mother's voice that she wished I was there more. But I held firm because I had learned that sustainable support was better than martyrdom. During one of my evening visits, about 3 months into my father's recovery, I was helping him practice walking with his cane. He was frustrated, struggling with the weakness on his right side, angry at his body for betraying him. "I hate this," he said, the words coming slow and slightly slurred. "Hate being helpless. You're not helpless," I told him. "You're healing. There's a difference." He looked at me, and something in his expression shifted. "You know about this, about healing." "I do," I acknowledged. "Was scared for you," he said carefully. "After your accident, didn't know how to help." It was the most direct he'd ever been about that time. I helped him to his chair and sat down across from him. "I needed you to just be present," I said honestly. "Not to fix anything or solve problems, just to sit with me and care that I was struggling." He nodded slowly, processing. "Did that wrong. Sorry. I know you are," I said. "And I forgive you, but I also learned from it. That's why I'm being clear about my boundaries now, because I love you and I'm here, but I can't sacrifice everything. That's not fair to me, and it's not sustainable." "You're right," he said. "You're doing good, helping but not drowning." It was such a precise way of putting it. Helping but not drowning. That was exactly what I was trying to do. "You taught me to be capable," I told him. "To be responsible and independent. Those are good things, but somewhere along the way, everyone started thinking that meant I didn't need anything from anyone, and that wasn't true. It was never true." He reached out with his left hand, and I took it. "See you now," he said. "Really see you." It was something. It wasn't enough to erase the loneliness of my recovery, the months of struggling alone. But it was acknowledgement. It was growth. It was my father, diminished and struggling, finally recognizing that his capable daughter was also human. The months continued. My father's progress was incremental but real. His speech improved, though it never fully returned to normal. His mobility increased, though he would always need a cane and would always tire easily. His cognitive function mostly recovered, though he sometimes struggled with word finding and complex problem solving. My mother adapted to the new normal. She retired from work to be more available, but she also started developing her own life again, joining a book club, taking art classes, maintaining friendships. She learned to ask for help when she needed it instead of pretending everything was fine. Joel and Vanessa decided to postpone having children, recognizing that their lives were more complicated than they'd anticipated. Joel continued showing up for our father, and in doing so, started building a more honest relationship with all of us. He apologized to me properly one evening, sitting in my apartment with tears in his eyes, admitting that he'd been selfish and self-absorbed and had failed me when I needed him. I accepted his apology and told him that what mattered now was how he moved forward. He was trying to do better. That counted for something. Miranda made progress with her therapist, started medication for her anxiety, and slowly became more functional in crisis situations. She would never be the person you'd call first in an emergency, but she was learning to contribute in the ways she could instead of collapsing entirely. And I continued my own healing, both physical and emotional. The chronic pain became something I managed rather than something that controlled me. The anxiety about driving eased with time and exposure. The nightmares became less frequent. Dr. Chen helped me process the complex feelings about my family, the love that coexisted with her, the forgiveness that didn't erase accountability, the boundaries that protected without severing connection. Marcus proposed to me a year into my father's recovery. We'd built something real, something based on honesty and mutual support. He'd seen me at my worst and stayed. He'd respected my boundaries and supported my commitments. He was someone I could count on, and who could count on me in return in ways that felt reciprocal rather than one-sided. I said yes. The wedding planning was different from Joel's. Smaller, more intimate, focused on what Marcus and I wanted rather than putting on a show. My family was involved, but I didn't let them take over. Miranda offered to be maid of honor, and I gently suggested she be a bridesmaid instead, asking my friend Sarah to stand beside me. It hurt Miranda's feelings initially, but I explained that I needed someone in that role who could focus on supporting me rather than someone I'd end up supporting, and she eventually understood. My father insisted on walking me down the aisle despite his limitations. We practiced with his cane, taking slow, careful steps, and on the day itself, he did it beautifully. He didn't make it through the whole reception. He tired easily, and my mother took him home early, but he was there for the important parts, and that mattered. During the father-daughter dance, which was shortened to accommodate his stamina, he looked at me with such fierce love and pride. "Proud of you," he said. "Not because you're capable, because you're you, whole you." I hugged him carefully and let myself cry a little. It was what I needed to hear, maybe what I'd always needed to hear. That I was valued for who I was, not what I could do. The years that followed were good in ways I'd never quite expected. My marriage was solid, built on genuine partnership. My career flourished. My relationship with my family evolved into something more honest and balanced. We all grew individually and together. My parents aged as parents do. My mother had a cancer scare that turned out to be benign, but reminded us all of mortality. My father had another smaller stroke a few years after the first, which set back some of his progress, but which he recovered from with the support systems we'd built. Joel and Vanessa eventually had children, 2 daughters who were adored by everyone. Joel became a surprisingly devoted father, perhaps learning from the mistakes of his own family dynamics. He made sure his girls knew they could need him, that asking for help wasn't weakness. Miranda married eventually, a kind man who was patient with her anxiety and supported her through it. She worked steadily with her therapist and made real progress, becoming more resilient and capable than anyone had expected. And I built a life that was full and meaningful, where I could be both capable and vulnerable, both strong and needy, both independent and connected. I maintained my boundaries with my family while staying in relationship with them. I helped when I could, said no when I needed to, and never again made myself invisible to avoid being a burden. The question I've reflected on most over these years is whether my family's failure during my recovery was cruelty or ignorance. I've come to believe it was neither exactly. It was a kind of learned blindness, a pattern that had been established so long ago that no one remembered how it started. They'd been taught that I didn't need them, and I'd been the one who taught them through years of asking for nothing and managing everything alone. Breaking that pattern required me to stop teaching them that lesson. It required me to be honest about my needs and clear about my limits. It required me to show them that help could be reciprocal, that vulnerability could be shared, that family could mean showing up for each other in real, consistent ways. It wasn't revenge what I did. Revenge would have been refusing to help at all when my father was sick, throwing their abandonment back in their faces, making them suffer the way I had suffered. That would have been satisfying in a shallow, temporary way, but it wouldn't have changed anything. Instead, I chose truth. I told them honestly how they'd failed me. I showed them clearly what real support looked like by providing it, but with boundaries that kept me whole. I gave them the opportunity to do better, and I held them accountable when they didn't. Some might say I should have cut them off entirely, that a family that fails you like that doesn't deserve your continued presence. But that felt too binary for the reality I was living. They were flawed people who loved me imperfectly. They'd caused harm without meaning to. They'd been capable of growth when confronted with their failures. Those truths could coexist. I think about that social worker in the hospital sometimes, the one who asked about my support system with such genuine concern. I wonder if he could tell, somehow, that my confident assurances about my family helping were more hope than reality. I wonder if he'd seen enough recoveries to recognize the difference between families who show up and families who mean well. I think about Patricia, the home health aide who was there every day when no one else was. I still send her a card every year around the anniversary of my accident, thanking her for the care she provided. She was paid to be there, yes, but she was also kind and present and professional in ways that mattered. She gave me dignity when I was at my most vulnerable. I think about Dr. Chen, who helped me understand that I deserved more than I'd been settling for, that boundaries weren't cruelty but necessary self-preservation. That growth was possible even from pain. Mostly, though, I think about my own journey from the person who thought she didn't need anything to the person who knows she deserves reciprocal care. It wasn't a dramatic transformation with a clear before and after. It was gradual, built from small realizations and difficult conversations and consistent choices to value myself as much as I valued others. My family is better now than they were. Not perfect, no family is perfect, but better. More aware, more present, more willing to show up even when it's inconvenient. We have regular dinners where we actually talk about real things. We check in on each other with genuine interest rather than obligation. We've learned to distribute support instead of assuming one person will handle everything. But I also know that this change required me to stop enabling the old patterns. It required me to be the one who was willing to be uncomfortable, to speak truth, to hold boundaries even when it would have been easier to give in. It required me to value my own recovery, physical and emotional, enough to protect it. There's a particular kind of loneliness in recovering from something hard while the people around you minimize or ignore your struggle. It's not the loneliness of physical solitude, but the loneliness of being unseen, of having your pain dismissed because it's not convenient or dramatic enough to demand attention. That loneliness changed me in fundamental ways. I'm more guarded now than I used to be. I don't trust easily that people will show up just because they love me. I test relationships by seeing what people do when I'm not at my best, when I actually need something instead of just being helpful. Some people fail that test, and I let them go with less guilt than I would have before. But I'm also more honest. I ask for what I need instead of pretending I don't need anything. I tell people when I'm struggling instead of maintaining the facade of fine. I've built relationships with people who can handle my vulnerability, who don't need me to be endlessly capable to find me valuable. Marcus understands this about me in ways my family still doesn't quite grasp. He knows that when I say I'm fine, it might be true or it might be my default response, so he's learned to look deeper, to ask follow-up questions, to create space for honesty even when I'm not volunteering it. He knows that my independence is hard-won and valuable, but also that it was born partly from neglect and that I'm still learning to trust that asking for help won't lead to abandonment or disappointment. We have 2 children now, a son and a daughter. I watch them learn to need and ask and trust that we'll respond, and I work hard to make sure they never have to choose between being capable and being cared for. I show up when they're hurt or scared or struggling, even when it's inconvenient, even when they don't ask. I want them to know, bone deep, that they matter beyond their usefulness. Sometimes I wonder how my life would have been different if my family had shown up during my recovery. If my mother had stayed with me, holding my hand through the pain. If my father had been present, not fixing but simply being there. If Miranda had pushed through her anxiety because I was worth the effort. If Joel had recognized that some things matter more than work deadlines. Would I be less cautious now? More trusting? Less focused on maintaining boundaries? Would I have learned the lessons about reciprocity and self-worth that I've learned, or would I still be the person who made herself infinitely available to avoid being a burden? I don't know. Maybe some version of me needed that particular pain to become this particular person. Maybe the growth required the wound. That's not the same as saying the wound was good or necessary, but it's acknowledging that it happened and I've built something meaningful from it. My father will need increasing care as he ages. His first stroke left damage that makes subsequent ones more likely. His mobility continues to decline. At some point, the current arrangements won't be sufficient, and harder decisions will need to be made about nursing care or assisted living. When that time comes, I'll be part of the conversation. I'll help make decisions and coordinate care and show up consistently. But I won't sacrifice my life or my family to become his full-time caregiver. I won't do for him what I once wished someone had done for me, because I've learned that martyrdom doesn't actually help anyone. Instead, I'll help him access good care while maintaining the relationships and boundaries that keep me healthy. I'll model for my siblings what sustainable support looks like. I'll make sure my mother isn't drowning while also not drowning myself. It's not the storybook ending where everyone learns their lesson and transforms completely. It's messier than that, more realistic. My family has grown, but they're still themselves, still flawed, still sometimes disappointing, still human. And I've grown too, in ways that mean I can be in relationship with them without losing myself. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven them. It's a complicated question. I released the anger, accepted what happened, and moved forward with our relationships. But forgiveness, for me, doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it didn't matter. It means acknowledging the harm while choosing not to let it define everything. I forgive them for being limited people who did their best within those limitations. I forgive them for not knowing what I needed when I didn't know how to tell them. I forgive them for prioritizing their comfort over my need, because people do that all the time and I've probably done it too. But I also hold them accountable. I remember what happened. I let it inform my choices about trust and vulnerability and how much of myself I give. I don't pretend that everything is perfect now or that the past doesn't matter. That's the balance I've found, loving them while protecting myself, maintaining connection while keeping boundaries, forgiving without forgetting. This story doesn't have a neat conclusion because life doesn't work that way. My family continues to evolve. My recovery, both physical and emotional, continues in its non-linear way. Some days are better than others. Some relationships are stronger than others. Some wounds heal cleanly while others leave scars that ache in certain weather. What I know for certain is this: I will never again make myself invisible to avoid being a burden. I will never again accept scraps of attention and call it love. I will never again prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own legitimate needs. And if that makes me difficult or demanding or less agreeable than I used to be, that's a price I'm willing to pay. Because I've learned that being easy to deal with isn't the same as being valued, and being capable isn't the same as being cared for. I hope that if you're listening to this and recognizing parts of your own story, you'll take from it whatever helps. Maybe it's permission to set boundaries. Maybe it's validation that your experience of being underestimated or overlooked in your own recovery matters. Maybe it's just the comfort of knowing someone else has navigated this particular kind of loneliness and come through it changed but whole. Recovery is hard. Harder than people who haven't done it realize. It's not just the physical healing, though that's brutal enough. It's the psychological work of rebuilding yourself, of learning new limitations, of discovering who shows up and who doesn't. It's the slow, painful process of accepting that some people will fail you and deciding what to do with that knowledge. You can become bitter. You can cut everyone off. You can spend years angry about what you deserved and didn't get. Those are all valid responses to betrayal and abandonment. But you can also do what I did, to use the experience as information, let it inform your boundaries and your choices, let it teach you about reciprocity and self-worth, and build something new from the wreckage. Not because you are noble or because you forgive easily, but because you deserve a life that's full and connected and honest, even if it looks different than you expected. My family is having dinner at my house this Sunday. My parents will come early so my father can rest before the meal. Joel and Vanessa will bring the girls. Miranda will bring her husband and probably arrive stressed about something. We'll eat together and talk and probably have at least one minor conflict because that's what families do. And I'll be present for it, fully myself, both the capable person they've always known and the vulnerable person they've learned to see. I'll help where I can and say no where I need to. I'll love them and maintain my boundaries. I'll be both connected and protected. That's my version of recovery. Not just healing from the accident, but healing from the patterns that preceded it, the roles that constrained me, the silence that isolated me. It's ongoing work, probably lifelong work. But it's work that's made me more whole, more honest, more truly myself. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting with the messy, uncomfortable truth of it. Thank you for not needing it to be tidy or more resolved than it is. I hope whatever you're recovering from, whether it's an injury, an illness, a betrayal, a loss, you find people who show up for you. And if you don't, I hope you show up for yourself. I hope you learn that you deserve presence and care, not because you're useful, but because you're human. And I hope when the time comes that someone else needs you, you remember what it felt like to struggle alone. I hope you show up. I hope you sit with them in their pain. I hope you make the effort and the sacrifice, because that's what real love looks like. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate you taking a moment to like this video or subscribe to the channel. And if you have your own story about recovery, about family dynamics, about learning to value yourself, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. We're all navigating this messy human experience together.